Hi there, I'm Marta Abawaji. I'm the head of community engagement at Springtide Research Institute, and I'm so delighted today to invite you into this live conversation. It's going to be a treat. We're going to be speaking with a UCC minister who is going to share about this recent experience he offered that had a virtual component, but it related to a lot of in-person spiritual practices that he invited his congregation to participate in. And I think there are some really key takeaways for any faith tradition, any sort of spiritual community or faith leader who's wanting to invite Gen Z as well as maybe an intergenerational audience to join into these practices. So let's invite my friend Anthony into this live moment. We are actually old friends. Anthony and I attended undergrad together, so this is an extra treat when I get to talk to a friend in this realm. So welcome, Anthony. We're so delighted to have you connecting with Springtide today. Could you just to get us started, I gave a small teaser to everyone listening about what today's conversation is going to center on, but will you first just let us know who you are, what has led you to this sort of vocational ministry work, and where you're at in the country too?
Yeah, thanks, Marta. It's great to see you and to be with you, old friend. And I am these days in Darien, Connecticut, which is a small town outside of New York City, suburbs. I've been here about a little over a year. My husband and I moved last February. The new senior minister here at a kind of a small, typical New England church. First Congregational Church of Darien, and I do all the usual kind of pastor stuff that you might expect.
Lovely. Well, it really is a delight to connect in this way. So you're Reverend Anthony Weissman. We can just call you Anthony for short in this conversation. We at Springtide are always curious about the ways that young people ages 13 to 25 are exploring community, identity, meaning. Those are the driving themes we're always curious about. But in today's conversation, I really want us to preview a bit about what we are exploring in the State of Religion and Young People 2023. That's going to really look at sacred encounters, sacred experiences, sacred moments. So I'll go into our definition of sacred in a bit. Why I think you are such a wonderful faith leader to be highlighting in this conversation is that you recently facilitated an offering for your congregation that had a very virtual dimension to it. It was through Instagram, actually, that you offered this through the liturgical season of Lent. So a 40-day period that you were utilizing a very virtual offering, but you were inviting people to consider different spiritual practices, a different one every day through the season of Lent. So let me just say, even if you're unfamiliar with this Christian season or even Christianity period, this conversation still has plenty of takeaways for people from all different faith backgrounds, all different faith traditions. So can you just let us know, what is it that you created that I'm alluding to here? And what were some examples of these invitations or challenges? Because they were simple practices, but I know they also were difficult sometimes. So if you could give us some examples of some of those spiritual practices, we'd love to hear those, as well as the whole shape of this offering.
Thanks, Marta. So for Christians, Lent is a season of spiritual deepening and reflection and renewal. And I think every Christian has a version of something like that. And so, in the UCC, in the Congregational United Church of Christ tradition, we have a pretty generous theology and a pretty open understanding of who God is and how we live as God's people. And so, when I was thinking about how to help people grow in their faith, we're not a kind of read your Bible, pray every day kind of tradition. It was more in the broad sense, how do we help people experience wonder and practice gratitude and live with compassion? I mean, those are sort of some guiding stars I have. Is what does it mean to be a Christian? I'd say something kind of like that. And how do you then translate that into a way of living? And so started this last year, but kind of morphed a little this year. I used a book called, I think it's called Simplifying the Soul, but I knew no one was probably going to go buy this book and read it. So I just took practices that I liked, and they kind of shook loose some new ideas for me and gave people a little nugget, a little 30-second, 1-minute bit of homework via Instagram, created a little video and just said, hey, today, here's what you should do. Here's something to try, a way to encounter the sacred in your daily life. And so they were simple things like, when you take out the trash, say a prayer for something in your life you want to take out, leave out with the trash. Just every time you do it, you could think about what's something I want to let go of and leave behind. Or, another one was don't look at advertisements today. We think about to live in a materialistic, acquisitive culture and how to be in it but not of it. I mean, one small thing to do is just not look at advertisements and try to get some free. So, but they were, as you said, harder things. I mean, one day it was forgive someone and thinking about all that's emotionally involved with that. So simple but not easy, little things, just day by day.
I loved this series. I will say that I was one of the folks watching. I'm not a member of Anthony's congregation, but I still, because it was Instagram, it was an easy vehicle for me to watch these short video invitations that you posted throughout Lent as these quick, they were like 60 seconds usually. The videos were really short and gave me an invitation to consider a practice I might want to incorporate that day or that week. And I'm just wondering what inspired this container and the Instagram being the vehicle through Lent. How did this all come together?
Well, I'll say short because when this started last year, I'm such an old person. I don't think I could figure out how to make them longer than 60 seconds without Instagram cutting me off. And I changed the platform, but I was like, let me just stick with this. And so it was by necessity short because I figured out the technology, but I'm sure many of you out there could do better. But really, I thought, again, I want to help people grow in their faith and in the sense of their connection to God and to other people and to the world. But, I want to be realistic and start where people are starting. And for most of my congregation, at least, as I said, they weren't going to go buy a book. They weren't going to come to church an extra time that week if I did a special service. I wanted to catch them where they were, and especially catch people who maybe are the ones who might not be the most plugged in on a Sunday morning anyway and might not be there for the sermon. So it was, what's a way to get in front of people, get in their face a little bit, and give them something to do that, it's really hard to kind of, if you minister says read your Bible and pray today, it's kind of like, oh well, whatever, but you don't really have to think twice if somebody says, hey, take a walk today, take a walk today and just be outside and feel how amazing creation is. Let a little awe sink in. It just feels different. And I wanted to help people just see that, meet who they are, and to help them see that faith is easy and it's really fun, and you can do it. And you can be prompted when you're doom scrolling. You can just find some kind of pastoral word, and then it can get you to do something.
I love that phrase, even that you said that faith is easy, because that's what we're wanting to explore in the state of religion in young people 2023 is how are young people, specifically ages 13 to 25, encountering these sacred experiences. And is it easy? Like, is it just something that people don't feel like they have to jump through a lot of hurdles, that they can be surprised maybe about what these sacred moments are? I really like in any of the invitations that you gave, you were personal with them. You would say, hey, this one is going to be really hard for me, or yeah, I don't want to have to think about forgiving someone today, if that was the challenge or the invitation. And that spirit of authenticity, Springtide has seen over and over again that Gen Z really cares about that value, that they're looking for that in their leaders and in the organizations that they're considering to be a part of, which would include faith leaders and faith communities. They want to see, is there a level of genuineness and authenticity from the people on the microphone, from the people in charge. And I know you personally, so I know you care about being real in those ways. But I also saw that spirit come through in all these videos. What can you say about that? Like, did you feel like people received your authenticity? Was that an element that people reflected on, or just how overall, how did your congregation receive this series? Are there any stories you want to highlight about how different spiritual practices were maybe explored for the first time or utilized in new ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think like uh, being a hypocrite is kind of an occupational hazard for those of us in ministry. And so, I always try not to do that. And so, one of the things is discipline of not asking people to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And so when I'm thinking about as a minister, how do I break down the spiritual life, the Christian life for people, I'm just not going to ask them something that I'm not going to do, and to do something I'm not going to do. And so, part of it was, there were things even in the book that I like, I'm not doing that. I don't think that's really generative, or I don't believe that. And so, in some ways, I hate to say it's kind of lowering the bar that I'm willing to rise to, but I mean, I'm trying to be honest about, here's where I am. And it's amazing if you're way above me on the spiritual journey. I hope you are. I hope the pastor's not the holiest person in the room, but just sort of, I think people appreciate having that you're with them on the journey and you're not kind of a mile out ahead. And I heard from people things that were actually surprising, how they engaged with this. There was one family that's lived in town here for a long time. I mean, since their kids were babies, I think. And the mom shared with me that they had never just gone to the town beach. There's a little town beach together, and they went and they had dinner on the beach one night in the cold and kind of bundled up and just were out there and hung out, and just what a meaningful thing it was for their family that it was prompted by one of these videos to get outside and to do something together. And I thought it was really special. I mean, again, is that obviously kind of a faith thing? No, but yeah, also it is. I mean, a family practicing love and being in God's creation and experiencing love and gratitude and awe together, that feels like a God kind of thing to me. And there was we had a hard funeral in kind of a big a death that was really kind of shaking for the town, and the funeral was at the church here. And afterwards, one of my members, older member, although if he's watching and if I called him older, he'd get mad at me, but he said, one of the things I'd ask people to do is I made a Spotify playlist of hymns that were kind of just put together in different kind of fun arrangements. He was like, I'm just so overwhelmed by this funeral, I just went home and listened to the Spotify playlist. And it was just like the power of these small things that just to unlock something for a person that I would never have thought of. It was really cool, because as pastors, that's what we want to do. And in some ways it's humbling, because I realize, gosh, how much of what I say on a Sunday morning doesn't do that, because it's not as simple as here's a playlist, listen, or take a walk. It's, well, let me tell you about the Trinity, and
Yeah, but I think folks think, by and large, the population thinks, okay, to be spiritual, I need to check a lot of boxes. And you're trying to break it down to say, like, be in nature, listen to a song, reflect, slow your life down for a moment. And I find this really invitational, and I find that it really correlates with what we're hearing from Gen Z with this experience of the sacred that we've been exploring in our research. So as I've said, the State of Religion and Young People 2023, it'll release this fall. So this is previewing what's to come, and this resource will be offered alongside it, the recording from today's conversation. But we want to understand, how are young people ages 13 to 25 defining the sacred? Because that term might not even be in everyone's vocabulary. So the way that we've defined it for our qualitative and quantitative research, as well as the reporting we're doing, is sacred moments or sacred encounters we define as experiences of deep wonder, awe, gratitude, deep truth, and or interconnectedness, which think is beautiful. I'm inspired by that definition alone. I think it's expansive in some really helpful ways, as well as particular. So our research found, I'm looking at my notes here so I get the data right, but our nationally representative research found that 55% of young people, regardless of religious affiliation, so this would include atheists, this would include nuns, as meaning folks with no particular religious or spiritual identity, including those folks, they report having had a sacred moment in their life, 55%. I think that's pretty significant, and that might surprise people about Gen Z, actually, that more than half of young people today report having a sacred moment. So, you've already said you feel like your job as a faith leader is to invite these moments. So what does that actually look like? And whether someone's a vocational minister like yourself or not, how can folks who care about accompanying young people, how can they create space for these sacred encounters to occur? And how can virtual spaces like the series you offered via Instagram, how can those daily invitations, how can those really connect to in-person spiritual practices for these potential sacred moments?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think something about faith is deeply intuitive, and something about the spiritual life is very intuitive. I think people are often doing it so naturally. What they get intuitively sometimes is that what they're doing naturally actually faith and God stuff, and that when you are in the woods and you're taking a walk and you're feeling this sense of interconnectedness to nature, or that's what God feels like. I mean, and when you're with another person, when you're on a first date and you feel flutters and you feel, something stirring, it's like, I think that's a God kind of a thing too. And I think so much of what people do in their daily lives is kind of a God kind of thing. And one of the things I can do as a faith leader is just help people name experiences as holy, which they already experience holy. So I do this more often in my praying than anything else. I do, kind of a very long kind of thank you God list for every prayer I ever do. And when people laugh, I think it's good to laugh during prayer too. But thank God for the sweet milk that's left after you've eaten all your. Thank God for mornings where you're just in your pajamas doing the crossword puzzle. Thank you, God, for presents on Christmas morning. Thank you, for birds that wake us up singing. And thank you, just any silly thing you can be thankful for. It's sort of nature parts of life that are beautiful and good in a way, and people see that the emotional connection they have to that, kind of the raw material that holy encounters are made of, and they're already there. If they can just be a little more present to it, it's there. And so I thought it was really interesting to me. We did confirmation last Sunday, which is when we sort of our rite of young people, kids becoming sort of young people, adults, sort of 14-year-olds. And we had 8 boys that we asked them to write their own personal faith statements, not just can you sign on the dotted line that you believe what the minister believes or the church believes or your parents believe, but they have to write their own statement of faith. And without a doubt, almost every boy, 14-year-old boys, they were using language that I've said in prayers. Like they're hearing something, that sense of just modeling that part of what faith looks like is being present to the world with a sense of wonder and gratitude, and being mindful of the call to compassion. They reflected that back. I mean, it's like you're hearing 14-year-old boys talk about bird song, and it's like, yeah, that came from some, or just like the way they think about God. It's like, no, I can help them see that they can just go live their life and they can have God right there with them. And that felt like so powerful for me as a faith leader, as like, it's really that simple. It's just helping people see what they're doing is already, they're on the way.
That's beautiful. I love the ways that you as a senior minister are still really personally accompanying young people youth that are in our exact age demographic of interest, and that you're saying these sacred moments are around us. Let me help you have eyes to notice them or language to name them, and they might be really simple things that you would have otherwise passed off or overlooked, but like you said, to identify the holy in all of these seemingly simple or seemingly really wonderful and awe-inducing moments of life.
Well,
I love that. Of a first date even, that was great.
but also, not to interrupt, but I was thinking too, like, I think there might be people that would say, well, that's kind of a vacuous kind of Christianity. It's not really a meaty kind of a faith if you're telling people to go take a walk in the woods or say a 20-second prayer when you take out the trash. And um, I don't know. I think it's worth saying that. Well, yeah, I think it's actually really kind of meaningful, and I'll confess I totally lost my train of thought. I was going to say something profound, and it just flew out of my mind. So
no, you're good. You're good. I mean, I think it relates to what we hear from Gen Z, because that's what we're curious about. How are young people making meaning in the world? And I think sometimes having a faith leader like yourself say, yes, if you think that's meaning producing, invoking, then yeah, it absolutely can be.
Yeah, it was that, not only is it just kind of watered down faith, but are you kind of, what's going to get people to church if all they're going to do is now they're going to go walk in the woods now church? Like, are you going to put yourself at a job by telling people, yeah, just take out the trash and say a prayer, why bother? And I think church is a place where we apprentice people and we practice together, learning how to do what we should be able to do in our lives on our own, but we're just not. I mean, I need to read a book about this because it doesn't come naturally to me. I need to be in community with people about this stuff. I think, to me, I think people come to church more when they get a sense that they're leaving with a way to experience the world in a deeper way, in a more full way. And so I think it's the opposite, that they're more likely to come if they get a sense that church is materially changing their experience of their own life. And I grew up in a tradition where and the answer was always read your Bible and pray more. Every sermon ended, that was the homework. And that, that was a perfectly good thing to do. And I tell people to do that too, but it's like, sometimes there's more to the world and more to life than that. And so I want to send people out and actually try to, let their life be touched by what happened. So.
Well, I mean, that really connects to what I want to dive into with you next, because this invitation that you offered was for individual practice, but it had a communal dimension to it, a larger connective element, because people were doing these individual practices alongside fellow members of the congregation. And in our research to understand what are these sacred moments that young people are defining as sacred and what are the characteristics of it, there are 3 different dimensions we found. And one of those dimensions that showed up again and again in our qualitative interviews was that sacred moments were relational, meaning that they're marked by profound feelings of interconnectedness. So I think this virtual series you offered relates to that relational component. Even though it was individual spiritual practices, there was a unifying effect. So can you speak to that? Did you see this series connect with folks across different ages and generations?
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting that people talked about them afterwards. I mean, more people than watched them even. I mean, we're not a huge church, but and so all it takes is a handful of people to watch and then talk about it, and it would come up at committee meetings or after church and coffee hour, and other people would then talk about it. And then it was kind of a community building thing. And some of the kind of homework put people in direct communication with one another and encouraged relation, with other human beings, with family, with the earth, and with God. And but it was meaningful. Again, the story of that family that came together in a new way. And but I feel like I did get lots of bubbling up little stories about somebody who tried something and it helped them, and then another person thought, huh.
I love that. I love that. That there were these breakout conversations, that it wasn't just a virtual experience that people just had isolated doom scrolling, like you said before, but that it was showing up in these in-person encounters. And this hybrid existence that I'm alluding to there is really the bread and butter for Gen Z. That's they don't in some ways know anything different than that there's this virtual connection, as well as in-person life, and they're not necessarily two separate things. Often they're very interwoven, especially for Gen Z. You and I are both millennials, but I think there's some of this in our life too. Perhaps older generations, where they've seen technology enter so many things, it might be hard for them to understand just how interwoven virtual and in person is. And in exploring sacred moments and sacred encounters for Gen Z, we wanted to understand, where do these happen? Are they in virtual spaces? Are they only in person when you're out in nature, or are they a combination? And so we found that about one fourth, actually 26% of young people ages 13 to 25 told us that they have experienced a sacred moment on more than one occasion while online. So those sacred moments, that might surprise folks, that it's great to be in nature, and so many Gen Zers tell us that nature is their sacred place in the world for sure. But a quarter are saying more than one time they've had a sacred moment online. So that might surprise folks, but since your series did have this hybrid component to it, I know even sometimes the invitations, you were telling people to do things through their phone, through technology, listen to this Spotify playlist, but sometimes it was the opposite. Turn off your phone for a day. Sometimes that people are like, I don't know if I can do that. How do you as a faith leader lean into this hybrid reality, for Gen Z and beyond? Because that's how we exist in the world today. So how do you invite your congregants to look for sacred moments in all different spaces?
Yeah, I mean, the whole exercise, the experiment is kind of, the premise behind it is, this virtual space can be holy ground, and it can be claimed as holy ground if we name it as that, and we help people experience such. And people are busy. That I think people have 30 seconds maybe for their pastor giving them a little, hi, how's it going, here's a pastor tip for the day. I'm not going to get a sermon every day, that's not going to happen, but they can maybe give me 30 seconds. And then so I think it was worth doing, just for the sake of getting some time with people that I wouldn't ordinarily get. And again, just an acknowledgement that we spend our lives on our phone. We just do, and I'm going to badger people about how what that's about. I think, just meet people there and acknowledge it's a public forum. Anyone can look in. So I'm not even like street corner preacher, like Jesus saves, kind of stuff. It's like, as a Christian, how do I translate my message into language that anybody can overhear, that somebody might want to share with somebody else, that might kind of overflow? How to, again, the most expansive view of the sacred possible. But even while, there was this attitude that the virtual can be a holy ground, I think it would be naive and it would be irresponsible not to say that the virtual as holy ground, as good as it is, it's not necessarily grounding in the same way that the beautiful, good earth beneath our feet is. And that part of what we can do as churches is be communities of reflection and conversation, where people talk about, what's it like being online right now for you? How long are you, how do you get some time to just think? What's your do not disturb this, kind of setting like? And I mean, I think to encourage people to talk about what feels good, what feels not good. How do you know when it's not feeling good? Just to be aware of, are you using this to not feel bored and alone? And you actually need to feel those things, because otherwise you're going to miss out on growing through them. We don't want to just and we don't, I want to encourage people to use it, celebrate it, but be mindful of it, and be Christian about it.
Good instruction for me to be mindful with technology. Like you said, it's a part of our lives. It's not going anywhere. So how can we be really thoughtful about the use of it, including the potential for these sacred moments, like we've heard from young people. You work cradle to grave, which is often the phrase for folks in vocational faith leadership positions. So you work with all different ages. In the spaces that you get to overlap youth and young adults, I'm wondering what draws you to work with them, since that is the demographic that we're always interested in being really attentive to and listening to at Springtide. And are there any observations you have about Gen Z in particular? Soon we'll be talking about Gen Alpha in not too long, but are there observations that could be helpful for folks, even if they're not in a ministry setting, if they're just encountering Gen Z in workplaces or schools or home environments, etc.?
I mean, our church has a long history of embracing youth and children in its ministry in the fullest sense and in leadership. I mean, when we confirm adolescents, we kind of quickly put them onto boards and committees, and they serve alongside of adults.
I love that.
As partners with them when we welcome their ideas. They're often just kind of brilliant and thoughtful and passionate and hardworking. Kids help me serve communion some Sundays. We do let kids, again, they share their faith statements, they read them in church for people. We seniors reflect when they graduate. They organize service projects through the church. My feeling is, that, and again, the Christian tradition in the book of Acts on the day of Pentecost, which is kind of the birthday of the church, there's this language about, the young have vision, old dream dreams. And, sort of we need both. We need the young with their visions and the dreams of the old. And for me, there's something really humbling about hanging out with people younger than me who have these dreams that I need to know. I need to know what they are. I'm more human. I'm better off. I just to, and also it's kind of selfish, but as a pastor, I don't want to grow old and be a curmudgeon. I don't want to become like a crotchety old guy. And I'm like well on my way to doing that. And so being around younger people who are like, you don't know this meme, like this slang or like whatever, there's something that just keeps me open in a way that, again, I think that's part of the gift to our elders that young people in faith communities can give, is just, growing young while we grow old. And I think there's really powerful about that. I think I don't want to be like that old guy now, like that millennial who knows all about the young people. And, now that I'm, in my almost 40, and it's like, what about teenagers? But I think to me, my experience is that they're eager to be seen and to be taken seriously. And if we do that, the relationships are gratifying and life-giving, both ways. And that, at the same time, they're dealing with pressures I've never had to deal with. And I just want to hold space for that, and also think of, as an adult, how can I alleviate some of that pressure? And, and what does that look like to try to make life a little easier for them? Because, we're leaving a world that's, I don't think it's fair just to say, okay, you're the future, save the day, it's all on you now. We really screwed up the world and we may not have a world, but, fix it. You're our best hope. It's like, I don't think that, I want to protect their innocence and their childhoods and their young adulthoods. I want them to be able to goof off and play and not have to worry about, like, gun control and, climate change. We should have worried about that. And so part of it is just being around them and seeing how stressed and pressured they are is also a reminder that I need to work harder as an adult, because I have coping mechanisms for that stress and pressure that they don't have yet. So I can love them, be present in their lives, and just be reminded about how being young is kind of great. We messed up because old people, we don't have our stuff together, and we need them to do our work for us.
I love hearing that, because that's really what we believe at Springtide, that young people should not just be disregarded, that there's so much to hear and respond to, and you're clearly doing that in your own setting. So thank you for the work you do. Thank you for today's conversation and just giving us an example of how this hybrid existence can be embodied, hopefully in a lot of different contexts or different faith traditions, where a virtual tool can be utilized to lean into different shared spiritual practices. And thank you. Thank you for taking the time to share. Where can folks follow you, your work, or maybe see exact examples of what we've been referencing in today's conversation?
Yeah, our church Instagram, FCC Darien, it's there. You can scroll back and see all the videos, very low tech, so no judging. And then on our website, uccdarien.org.
Thank you again for this beautiful conversation and example. So appreciate your time. You can also, if you're new to Springtide, you can follow Springtide on Instagram at We Are Springtide, as well as across other social media platforms. You'll find us there. And all of our research findings, we have a lot of free resources even on our website you can find at springtideresearch.org. Thank you for joining us today, and do look forward to that upcoming report that will release this fall for the state of religion and young people 2023. Thanks, everyone.